On the introduction of the minor prophets, we'll see that an introduction to these prophets goes back to chapter 14 and then is just a study through the rest of 2 Kings. And so what we're dealing with tonight then is down in chapter 22. If I can get my machine here to work. Okay, down in chapter 22 and 23, we're going to be studying about a man by the name of Josiah. But first of all, we got up here, let's review the history. Now let's make sure that we understand where we are in this history, that here we bring in Israel. Now, we have Jerusalem there and the orange, and then we have Israel, and Hoshea was the last king of Israel. Now up there we have Shalmaneser, and he was the king of what country? Assyria. All right, Shalmaneser now has come down and conquered the 10 tribes, brought them back up, and just scattered them throughout Assyria. And this happened in the year 722 BC. We read in 2 Kings chapter 17 and verse 18 that the Lord removed them all, and the only thing that was left was the tribe of Judah only. And that is when Hezekiah was the king there. So we have Hezekiah. Then, by the way, what kind of a king was Hezekiah? Exceedingly good king. And then his son, Manasseh. Horrible king. And then Ammon. Horrible king again. All right. Now then, we have Josiah that comes along, and he's the guy that we're going to be talking about tonight. What kind of a king do you suppose Josiah is going to be? The greatest of all. He's going to be the very best king that there is, and he's going to be ruling now in what country? Let's keep it straight. Judah. Israel is gone, so it's going to be down in Judah of where it is. So here, as we had our chart last week, we just wipe out the kings up there of Israel. Down here we have these kings of Judah. Now tonight we're going to be looking at Josiah. Josiah now, well, okay, got this other one right here. Here we have Israel, wipe them out. There we have the lineage of David. The lineage of David goes through Judah and right on down past. Again, as we look at it in here and bring it down just a little bit more, it goes clear over. And why do we have to have that lineage of David always intact? Why must it always be intact? Because of the Christ. So let's keep this in mind now as we go down through. We see up there that the tribes of Israel, they can be wiped out and really no harm is done other than the harm of wiping out kingdoms and so forth. But Christ is the thing that we have to keep these tribes in there for. Now then, we have the tribes of Judah. As we got these, the kings of Judah. The kings of Judah are going to come down, and even they are going to come to an end in just a little while. But we have to keep this thing going because we've got Christ. Now, when they come to an end, we have that black spot that is right there. They're going to be taken off into Babylonian captivity. They're going to be forgotten for a period of 70 years. God is just going to move out and let them go. But what's God going to do at the end of 70 years? He'll bring them back again, see? And they will be in existence then down there when Christ comes. Now, we have prophets that are back here. The first prophet that we run across is Jonah. Now, Jonah did not preach to Israel or Judah. Who did Jonah preach to? To Nineveh. That's a city. What country is that? All right, it's Assyria. And Nineveh was the capital of Assyria. And so that's what we studied in this last time there, was about Jonah and how he went up there. Now we have Hosea and Amos, who preached to the kings and the people up there in Israel. And we have Isaiah and Micah preaching to the people down here in Judah. Isaiah preached to the people in the city. He was the prophet that preached to the king. He's what you might say was almost the king's personal prophet. And then Micah would have been the guy that goes out into the other cities around about Jerusalem, down there in Judea, and preaching in that particular area. Now then, over here when we come to Josiah, we have two more prophets that come on, and this is Jeremiah and Zephaniah. Now the reason we know that Jeremiah and Zephaniah preached during the reign of Josiah is that as we look at it here, we'll see that we get some scriptures that comes up that shows this very thing. We have Hezekiah, two evil kings. Then we have the very best of all of them. We have Josiah that is coming along. Now, when you go to Jeremiah, each one of these prophets date themselves, don't they? See, they start out, I started preaching here, he said, in the days of Josiah, the son of Ammon. And notice down here, as you look on down, how long did he say that he preached? I began here with Josiah, then I went on down into this king right in here, and went on unto the end of the 11th year of Zedekiah. All right, who's the last king? It's going to be Zedekiah. So Jeremiah is going to start with Josiah. He will preach right on until Zedekiah and the tribe of Judah is taken into captivity. Now, it'll be interesting of what Jeremiah tells these people that the other prophets didn't tell them. Now, when you read the other prophets, when you read Hosea and Amos and all of those guys, they were back there preaching to Israel. What was their message? If you put it in one word, repent, wasn't it? In other words, change your ways. You're an ungodly nation, change your ways, and if you don't change your ways, God will take you into captivity. But what will happen if you do change your ways? God will save you. See? So he had all of these promises that were there. So you have the promises of Isaiah and Micah the same way. But now, here in the days of Josiah, as he comes on, Josiah is going to do one of the most unusual things, one of the greatest things in the Old Testament that we'll be looking at tonight. And Jeremiah is going to help him in doing this, and it's going to appear in our lesson tonight that Josiah was very successful. When we get through tonight, we're going to say, boy, that's the way it looks. He was very, very successful. But the sad story is he wasn't. He was successful in one way, but then the people went right back into their evil ways again. So, Jeremiah now starts doing something you don't read in the other prophets. Now then, Jeremiah starts telling Judah, it's too late. Forget it. Just forget it. You've waited too long. It's too late. Babylon is coming. You are going to be taken into captivity. So don't even try to escape. Don't even try to fight. Don't do anything about it. When Babylon comes down, just roll over and say, here we are, and give up. Isn't that a strange thing that he's going to be preaching? Because they haven't lived up to their potential the way that they should. Now then, we have Zephaniah. He again says he starts in the days of Josiah. So now, these are the two prophets then that is going to help Josiah. All right, now as we look at this, remember, 57 years ago, Isaiah told Hezekiah, which would have been what, the great-great-great-great-grandfather of Josiah, he told him that Babylon was going to come over and get Judah and take Judah back into captivity. Remember that? Now, when he told him that, what kind of a country was Babylon? It was just a little city. It was just a city, but Babylon is going to be the one that is going to do it. And you are going to be carried away here. Judah is going to be carried away there. Now, Josiah is the last chance for Judah. It's going to be the last chance. Josiah is going to do some very great things, but Judah has passed the mark of really repenting, and some terrible things are going to happen. So now then, the story of Josiah is told in 2 Kings 22 and 23 and 2 Chronicles 34 and 35. We're going to use 2 Kings, and then at the end of class, we'll jump over to 2 Chronicles there for just a moment. But now, as we turn over and begin to look at him, I want us to note, we know one thing for sure as we start out. What Josiah did was right. No question about it. In 2 Kings it said, and he did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord, and walked in the ways, all the ways of David his father, and turned not aside to the right hand or to the left. Again, when he died, it was said, And like unto him there was no king before him that turned to the Lord with all his heart, with all his soul, with all his might, according to all the laws of Moses, neither after him arose there any like him. So Josiah did that which was right. Now I'm going to emphasize that to you right now, because if you read what Josiah did, you go out and you get 100 people off the street and say, I want to read to you about what this one king did. Do you think that was right or not? About 100 out of 100 will say, that's one of the most horrible things I have ever heard of in my life. That man is, there's something wrong with that man when we get down there and we see it. But you keep in mind that what he did was right, absolutely no question about it. Now, Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem, we're told in the first verse of chapter 22. Now, Josiah did some great things during his youth. We'll get this, then we'll go to look at the text. Now, at age 16, we get this out of 2 Chronicles, there, in the 8th year of his reign, while he was still young, he began to seek the God of his father David. So at age 16, he really started making an impact in looking and seeking God. At age 20, we're told, in the 12th year, he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem of the high places, the wooden images, the carved images, and the molded images. Now, what do we find that these other kings haven't done? They haven't kicked them out yet. This guy is getting ready to do that, and you're going to be amazed at all the things that he did. So he started that at age 20. Now, at age 26, in his 18th year, he began to repair the house of the Lord, his God, and began his restoration movement. Now, I emphasize that restoration movement because I want to make a play on this that we're going to see that you and I can learn a great deal about this. When we put Josiah in proper perspective, there is Christ. Down here in 2001, we are. Josiah lived back there 600 years before Christ, and 1,000 years before the law, after the law. Law was given in 1600. He lived in 600. Now, there was 1,000 years of apostasy that was going on. Now, you and I have lived through that 1,000 years, haven't we, in this class? See, we've gone through these chapters by chapters, and we've seen how that apostasy went. All of those Jews went astray for that period of 1,000 years. Now, after the Jewish people had been in apostasy for that 1,000-year period of time, Josiah begins to do his work. Now, I want you to note what he did, what his grandfather was like. His grandfather, it says, and he did that he did evil in the sight of the Lord, according to the abominations of the nations, whom the Lord cast out. He rebuilt the high places. So this guy actually rebuilt all of these idolatrous places. Granddad did. Well, what did his, in here, and his grandfather's name was Manasseh. Manasseh seduced them to do more evil than the nations whom the Lord had destroyed. So his grandfather was more wicked than the Canaanites that God had driven out. Well, what about his father? His father, it says, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord, as his father Manasseh had done. So he walked in all the ways that his father had walked. And he served the idols that his father had served. He forsook the Lord God. Now here's a guy that grew up in this family. That's the kind of grandpa he had. That's the kind of father he had. And now then he becomes a king. And at age 16, he began to turn with all of his heart to God. Isn't that speaking quite well of him when you look at it like that? The background, the family life that he came out of. Now, in the midst of this corruption, Josiah was born right in the middle of the whole total thing that is in there. All right? As we look at it over here then again, we put these same pictures up here. We learn Josiah is our example, and we want to use him for an example. Now, over in 1 Corinthians, Paul said, talking about the Old Testament events, he said, now, all these things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonition upon whom the end of the ages are come. So why did God put all of these stories in the Old Testament? For you and me, so that we will have examples of people. We have examples of people doing that which is wrong, and we stay away from it. People who give examples of doing that which is right, and then we set our heart upon doing it. So you think that Josiah might be a good example for us to follow? Because we know he did that which was right, see, in every way, no question about that. There we find that the Lord plainly tells us that he didn't turn aside in any way there for it. Okay, now, let's look at his life in 2 Kings chapters 22 and 23 and see what it is all about. All right, as we start out here, he began reigning in there. He did that which is right. Now, as we start out in verse 3, first of all, I want to call your attention to one thing. How many true religions are there in the world at this time? Only one, isn't there? In other words, God called Abraham, and God has been working through Abraham all of this period of time. Are any of these other gods true gods? Any of these other religions, idolatrous religions, true religions? By the way, how many religions would there have been in the world at that time? Oh, uncountable, see, numbers. But there was only one true religion with one true God. Now, that's where Josiah starts out that's in here. Now, he learned that his fathers had corrupted that one true religion. We're going to see that over in verse 13. But, first of all, I want us to start looking right here. Well, let's go to verse 13 for right now, and then we'll come back in here. He goes out and he says, "Go ye inquire of Jehovah for me and for the people and for all Judah concerning the words of this book that is found. For great is the wrath of Jehovah that is kindled against us, because our fathers have not hearkened or listened unto the words of this book." We'll find out what that book is and so forth. But what he finds out is he's living at a time, as we've already seen, his fathers had corrupted that one true religion. All right? Another thing, Josiah and his peers, the generation in which he was living, it was an honest generation. Here you have all of this corruption. It's been going on for 1,000 years, but this generation is honest. Let's take a look at why I would say that. As we start out now, down in the verse 4, he said, "Go up to Hilkiah the high priest, that he may sum the money which is brought into the house of Jehovah, which the keepers of the threshold have gathered of the people." Remember that they had set up this box so that when people came in, they could make a contribution to repair the temple because it was all torn up and damaged. All right, Josiah said, it's time to do that. So go up to the high priest, get the money out, have him to sum it up, so you can take it down and start doing it. Verse 5. "And let them deliver it into the hands of the workmen that have oversight of the house of Jehovah, and let them give to the workmen that are in the house of Jehovah to repair the breaches of the house, unto the carpenters and the builders and to the masons, and for buying timber and hewing stones to repair the house." So go give it to all these craftsmen that are going to repair this house. Now verse 7. "Howbeit, there was no reckoning made with them of the money that was delivered unto their hand, for they dealt faithfully." Now, I just point this out because he's dealing in a generation of some honest men, isn't he? These men aren't cheating. They don't even have to give an account of the money because they're honest and they're all dealing faithfully that is in there. So they go give it to them. Hilkiah the high priest said unto Shaphan the scribe, as they start going into the temple and repairing the house, they find something that is rather unusual in here. They found the book, the law of Moses, as we read in verse 8. So he said, "I have found the book of the law in the house of Jehovah." I think that is really unique. Here it is, we're in the house of Jehovah. Who should have been the most righteous people that in the whole world? Those people right there in the house of Jehovah, right? the high priest and all of them. Now, they go in there, and the shocking thing is, they found the book of God. They found the law of Moses. Wow! The law of Moses had been lost. The Jews didn't have it. They didn't have it. They found the book. Isn't that shocking? Can you imagine if you didn't have the Bible, you hadn't read it throughout your life, and all of a sudden you go down to the church building and you find a copy that's put away down there, and you pull it out for the first time, what would you do? Pull it out, you'd look, and you'd start reading, wouldn't you? Okay. Now then he starts reading in here, and he said, comes down in verse 11, and it came to pass when the king had heard the words of the book of the law, he rent his clothes, and the king commanded Hilkiah the priest, and Ahikam, the son of so-and-so and so-and-so and all that, the king's servant, saying, Go ye, inquire of Jehovah for me and for the people, and for all Judah concerning the words of this book that is found. For great is the wrath of Jehovah that is kindled against us, because our fathers have not hearkened unto the words of this book, to do according to all that which is written concerning us. So here it is, he read it. He repented, and he inquired. Can you just imagine that as he's sitting down, he's reading this book for the first time, and he gets over here, and he finds that God says, if you obey me and you do this and you do that, I will protect you and I'll drive all these nations out and so forth. If you don't, I will do all of this damage to you. And then he begins to read, and they have all these feast days. And they're not keeping these feast days. They have all these laws. They're not keeping these laws. And all of a sudden he realizes, here it is, I'm king of a nation that is not keeping the law of Jehovah. And God has made it very clear what he's going to do to the Jewish nation if we don't keep his laws. It's a horrible thing. He's going to destroy us. So Jeremiah read this. He's sick at the heart. And so he said, I want you now to go get a prophet, and it's going to be a woman. You go get this prophet, and you inquire of Jehovah, and you ask Jehovah what we can do. Now, keep in mind, who caused this apostasy? Who caused this horrible condition? Was it Josiah? No, it was his forefathers. His forefathers had done this, and he lays it right there. He said that the wrath of Jehovah is kindled against us because our fathers have not hearkened. See? So his forefathers had not hearkened, yes. He'd be 20 at this time. Yeah. He'd be 20 now. Now, his forefathers hadn't listened. So go ask this prophetess, what can we do? Because I tell you, if God does what God said he was going to do, this nation is just going to be absolutely destroyed. So they go, and they ask her in verse 14, there it is, they went unto Huldah, the prophetess in here, and so they ask her, and they commune with her. Now in verse 15, she said unto them, Thus saith Jehovah, the God of Israel, Tell ye the man that sent you to me. Who would that be? Josiah. Okay. You go back and you tell Josiah in here, here's God's answer. God said, Behold, I will bring evil upon this place, and upon the inhabitants thereof, even all the words of the book which the king of Judah hath read. I'm going to do everything I said I would do. Well, it's just horrible. He said in verse 17, he said, Because they have forsaken me, and have burned incense unto other gods, that they might provoke me to anger with all the work of their hands, therefore my wrath shall begin kindled against this place. What place? Jerusalem, and the temple that is there. And it shall not be quenched. My wrath will not be quenched. Nobody's going to pour water upon it and get me to change my mind. 18. But unto the king of Judah, who sent you to inquire of Jehovah, thus shall you say to him, Thus saith Jehovah, the God of Israel, As touching the words which thou hast heard, because thy heart was tender, and thou didst humble thyself before Jehovah, when thou heardest what I had spoke against this place, and against the inhabitants thereof, that they should become a desolation and a curse, and you have rent your clothes and wept before me. I also have heard thee, saith Jehovah. Therefore, behold, I will gather thee to thy fathers, and thou shalt be gathered to thy grave in peace. Neither shall thine eyes see all the evil which I will bring upon this place. And they brought the king word again. Okay. They go tell God about Josiah. God says, I will not repent, I will not change, I'm going to destroy this place. Howbeit, for Josiah, and notice, because what? When he heard the word, his heart was tender. His heart was tender. And he turned and he inquired, you see, about these things. So you tell him, I'll not do it in his day. I'll not destroy Jerusalem while he's alive. I will wait until after he's dead, and then I'm going to destroy the city. Okay, so Josiah now gets this message. What Josiah starts to do now is one of the greatest things that you read about. And that is that he immediately starts a restoration movement, is what it is. Josiah restored the original law. That's what he did. He said, now we've got the law, let's take it, and let's restore this law. And they did it by using the law. In other words, here's the law, let's read the law, let's put the law back in effect so that everybody is obeying the law, you see, that is there. Let's look in chapter 23, and he called all the inhabitants down, and we'll start in the middle of verse 2. He called all the people together, both small and great, and he read in their ears all the words of the book of the covenant, which was found in the house of Jehovah. And the king stood by the pillar and made a covenant before Jehovah to walk after Jehovah and to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all his heart, all his soul, to confirm the words of this covenant that were written in this book, and all the people stood to the covenant. So he said, we're going to take this, and we're going to go back and do everything this covenant, this law says we should do. What did the people do about that? They agreed with it. They stood to the covenant, and they said, okay, let us do this. So now then, that's what he is getting ready to do. All right, now get ready for number 8. Point number 8, the next thing that he does is this. He threw out everything that should not be in. He just wiped out everything of that 1,000 years that his forefathers had done. And that's what we began to read. So let's read this. This is what I said. If you go out and you ask people, let me tell you about what this king did. They're going to say, well, that's not nice. But let's see what he did. He didn't miss a thing. In verse 5, it says here, in verse 4, and the king commanded Hilkiah the high priest and the priest of the second order and the keepers of the threshold to bring forth out of the temple of Jehovah all the vessels that were made for Baal and for the Asherah and for all the host of heaven, the stars, and he burned them without Jerusalem in the field of Kidron and buried the ashes of them unto Bethel. Now, shocking. Where were all of these idols of Baal and this Asherah? Right inside the temple. He had moved it right inside the temple. He brought them all out. He burned it, took the ashes, spread them out, all the way up to Baal. 5. And he put down the idolatrous priest, whom the kings of Judah had ordained to burn incense in the high places of the city of Judah, and in the places round about Jerusalem, them also that burned incense unto Baal, to the sun, the moon, the planets, and to all the host of heaven. And he brought out the Asherah from the house of Jehovah, without Jerusalem, unto the brook Kidron, burned it at the brook Kidron, beat it into dust, cast the dust thereof upon the graves of the common people. Do you think he's really going to work? I mean, taking that, beating that into dust, sprinkling the dust out on the graves of the people that's out there that brought them into this condition that's there, taking all the priests out of their office. Verse 7, and he brake down the houses of the Sodomites that were in the house of Jehovah, where the women wove hangings for the Asherah. So the Sodomites had moved into the temple. And the women sitting there at the gate there of the Asherah, weaving blankets in there for these Sodomites and these worshipers of Asherah. So he goes in and he throws all them out. And he brought all the priests out of the cities of Judah and defiled the high places where the priests had burnt incense. What does it mean he defiled the high places? He tore them down. He went right into their high places and he tore them up. What would happen today if somebody went into the false religions throughout the land and all the false religions just tore them up and burned them? Oh, man. Would that be something that would go on? All right. He goes into this all the way from Geba to Beersheba. And he brake down the high places of the gates that were at the entrance of the gate of Joshua, the governor of the city, which were on a man's left hand at the gate of the city. Nevertheless, the priests of the high places came not up to the altar of Jehovah in Jerusalem, but they did eat unleavened bread among their brethren. And he defiled Topheth, which is in the valley of the children of Hinnom, that no man might make his son or his daughter to pass through the fire to Moloch. Now, you remember the passing through the fire? Moloch, Topheth, those big idols that they put their babies in? Now, they had one of these things in the valley of Hinnom. Do you know how far the valley of Hinnom is from the temple? Right next to it. You go out of the valley of Hinnom right up into the temple grounds. Right there, just right there. And so if you were standing up the temple, you look down, and there's a valley, and there's the valley of Hinnom, and down there they had this big old Moloch that is down there. How deeply involved was Judah in idolatry at this time? See, when you read about this. So he goes out and he gets all that. He took away the horses that the kings of Judah had given to the sun, and the entrance of the house of Joshua by the chamber of so-and-so there, which he, the precincts, and he burned the chariots of the sun with fire. So they dedicated some horses and chariots to the sun. He took all of them away. He goes out and he breaks down everything. He takes his fathers there, the altars of Manasseh, and he broke it down. 13. And the high places that were before Jerusalem, which were on the right hand of the Mount of Corruption. Now, here it is, you have the high places right before Jerusalem. The Mount of Corruption. That's the Mount of Olives. That's the mount right before Jerusalem. You go out of Jerusalem, you go down through a valley, right up on the Mount of Olives. Why do you call that the Mount of Corruption? That's what he's tearing down. He said, go over and tear down the things that they put over there. They've corrupted that mountain, you see, that's there. The high places that were before Jerusalem, there in the Mount of Corruption, which Solomon, the king of Israel, had built for the Asherah, the abomination of the Sidonians, and the Shemoth, and the abomination of Moab. So these are things that Solomon had built, these temples. Why had Solomon built all of these temples around Jerusalem? For his wives. They all wanted them, so he filled up the Mount of Olives over there with all of these temples. 15. Moreover, the altar that was at Bethel, and the high places which Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin, had made, even that altar. And the high places he brake down, and he burned the high places, and beat it to dust, and burned the Asherah. So for the first time, since Jeroboam built that altar and put that golden calf upon it, for the first time, it's been torn down. Everybody else left it up there. The Israelites worshipped it. Even when Judah the kings of Judah was tearing down the gods of the Canaanites. They always left that up there. So he goes up and he tears that thing down there and beats it into dust. And he goes on out. He sees a sepulcher out there, a grave. He said, "What's that?" They say, "That's that young man that went up to cry out against the altar." Remember that guy? Went up and he cried out against the altar, and the king said, "Come on in and eat with me." And he said, "I wouldn't go in and eat with you if you gave me half of your kingdom." Because God said, "Come up one way, cry against this altar, go back another way." He did it. And the old prophet came and caught him. Remember the story now? He said, "God told me," so he went back and ate. And on the way home, the lion killed him. And the old prophet buried him in his own grave. So he looked at him and he said, "Leave that grave alone." So he left that there. Then in verse 21, "And the king commanded all the people, saying, Keep the Passover unto Jehovah your God." So now, here it is that he's getting ready to do something else. Notice right here that he threw out everything that should not be in there. Okay? Now then, here's what he put down. He put down all of the idolatrous priests, all of these things that we've got up here. He defiled everything. He cleansed everything out. You see? Cleansed it all out and threw it away. That's there. Now, you ready for number 5? What do you suppose he's going to do now? He's got everything cleaned out. Now then, he's going to restore it back to its original condition. Put it back to its original condition. What do you have to do before you can put it back to its original condition? When you got all that junk that's around there. Got to get rid of it. Now then, we're going to restore things back and put it in its original condition that is back there then. Okay, he's going to use the law. He's going to take that law, and whatever that law says, he's going to restore it and put it back in that condition. Now then, if you'll notice, this part here in 2 Kings, it just takes up a couple paragraphs. But if we go over to 2 Chronicles, we have a much more detailed study of this. So I'm going to flip over there in 2 Chronicles, and we'll get us a more detail in 2 Chronicles chapter 35. Okay, he starts out now, and verse said, "And Josiah kept a Passover unto Jehovah in Jerusalem. And they killed the Passover on the 14th day of the first month. And he set the priest in their offices." So now then, what's he doing in here? All right, as he puts it back in, he kept the Passover, just exactly like the law said. Then he set the priest back in their offices. He'd thrown out the old idolatrous priest there. Then he put the Holy Ark back in again in verse 3. Put the Holy Ark in the house which the Solomon, the son of David, and so forth had built, that is thereon. So you have this. He prepared the right people to do it. That's supposed to take it back in, the Levites and so forth, that is supposed to take it back in. Now notice down there, so I put down 6, 7, 8, and 9. As you look at these things, what did he use as a guide to put things back in? The word of the law. As you look at it in verse 6, to do according to the word of Jehovah by Moses. In verse 12, as it is written in the book of Moses. Verse 13, according to the ordinances. Verses 16, according to the commandment of King Josiah. So that's what he used. Now he goes ahead and he puts it all back the same way it was. If you'll notice the verse 18, there was no Passover like to that kept in Israel from the days of Samuel the prophet. Neither did any one of the kings of Israel keep such Passover as Josiah kept. And the priests and the Levites and Judah and Israel that were present and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. In other words, he's putting everything back the way it should be. Now, what do we have here? We have what is called a restoration movement, of where he has taken that which was corrupt and he is restoring it back to its original condition. You see, that is in there. Now, Josiah is a Bible example for us. It's in here. He was restoring God's one true religion. The religion was ordained of God. It was corrupted by generations, and then he restored it back to its normal condition. Now, how can we use this as an example today? All right, over here is Josiah, king of Judah. We have him. Now then we have Jesus Christ, and we come over, and Jesus purchased one true church, didn't he? Now, when he purchased that one true church, then finally, starting in about the year 120, it became corrupt and started going astray. For another 1,000 years, in reality for about 1,700 years that you have it, but for the first 1,000 years, there you had Catholicism, Protestantism, 20,600 false religions. That's what the government says we have today. All set up today. They all go back and name Christ as their Savior. They say, this is of Christ. All right? How many true religions were there then? One. How many true religions are there today? One. They came from Christ. Now then, there it is. They corrupted it. Today, in 2001, we come back, we find that we have to restore that the same way that Josiah did. We have to go back and say, look, this religion has been corrupted. Here it is, all these people for all these thousands of years have been bringing in things that are not in the book of God. They brought in all kind of burning incense. This is when instrumental music came in. Everything that the Catholic Church has brought in. All of these things, they brought it in under the guise of serving Jesus Christ. Now, when all of a sudden we find the Bible and we say, boy, here's the Bible. What should we do? I want to flip back over here, if I can, real fast to this right back over here. That here we have what he had, and we see they had one true religion. Now, his forefathers had corrupted that one religion. Have ours corrupted Christianity? Now, Josiah and his peers were honestly wrong. Well, we can be honestly wrong, can't we, today? Be honestly wrong here. Now, they found the book. Now, when all of a sudden you pick up your Bible and you find it. By the way, what has the Bible been hid under for 1,700 years? What was it hid under? No, nobody could see it. What? All right, Catholicism and creed books, false doctrines. If you want to know what the Bible says, cover it up. Get rid. You want to know what the Bible says? The year is 1000 A.D. How do you find out what the Bible says? You go to the clergy. You go to the Catholics. And you say, what does God want? And he has been ordained, and he tells you what it was. Did you read it out of the Bible? No. It tells you what it was. All right, you come on down. And Martin Luther and those men that led the Protestant movement, they said, we're throwing off Catholicism. Now then, we're going to go back, we're going to take the Bible. So, a Methodist says, I want to know what the Bible teaches. Where do you go? Methodist Creed book. That's where you go to find out what it teaches. Any religion you're in. What does the Bible teach? We go to our creed book. Well, how about if we open up the Bible, just like Josiah did, and we read it for the first time? And we see in here that Jesus says, call no man on earth your father. Would that ring a bell? Hey, that's what everybody's calling them. What do you mean? This is what God said. It's different than that. Well, what is our job then in trying to restore New Testament Christianity? What was it that he did back over here then as he was trying to restore this? I didn't get quite back here far enough. Yeah? He put everything out, didn't he? He took everything that should not have been in there and he put it out. So we're going to take instrumental music, we're going to throw it out. We're going to take the Eucharist, and we're going to throw it out. We're going to take burning of incense, we're going to throw it out. We're going to take prayers for the dead, being saved on your deathbed there, and throw it out. Everything we can't find in the Bible, we're going to throw it out. So we're throwing out all the creeds of man. After we get them out, now what do we have to do? Now we have to pick up our Bible and put back in what should be in. So we pick up our Bible, and here's what God says. That's what we're going to do. Here's what God says. That's what we're going to do. And here's what God says. Then that's what we're going to do. Now, when Josiah did that, and when he got through with that whole thing, had he restored Old Testament religion? Had he put it back in its original order? It was. It was back there. Now, when we do that, have we then restored the church? Is the church back in its original order then? You see there, as we go through it in there. Flip on this. I think I have another chart right here, but I'm not sure. But time is just about up. So, we use that as an example of what do we do when we find all of these things happening. Go back to Josiah, and we see what really happened to him back there. Now, there's what I wanted to get at. If he was right back there, then we are right. I'm going to quit putting these things up. It takes so long there. Okay, if Josiah was right, then we're right. Isn't that right? Because we're doing the same thing he did. And was he right? You bet. We know he was right. So in our efforts of what we're trying to do, we know that is an honorable thing. You don't have to be afraid of it. See? We're going back to that one true church. You don't have to be afraid of what we're doing. Going back to restore that. Okay, let's close out class. Here it is with Josiah. Here it is, a mystery about Josiah's death that you can ask him about if you get there before I do. If I get there first time I'm going to meet him and say, Josiah, why did you go do that? Say, go do what? Nobody knows why he did this. Here is this great king. He had a reason somehow. But down here in Egypt, the king down here was having problems with the king over here in Assyria. How often did these two great kings have problems with one another? Constant, see? All right, so he gets up here, and he heads up to go up this way, and he goes up here to Megiddo. Now, the reason he went up here to Megiddo is because this is where the road is. You have to take this road to get over here to Assyria. Now, Josiah goes up here to Megiddo, and when he comes up, he goes out and stops him. And the king of Egypt said, look, this is none of your problem. I'm not going to fight against you. I'm in a war against Assyria. I'm going on up there. And Josiah says, no, you're not. Why? He said, I have no idea. And so they said, well, we'll take care of you right now. We started a battle, pulled out a bow and arrow, shot, hit Josiah. He got wounded. He looked up and he says, take me back to Jerusalem. They stopped the chariot, put him in another chariot, took him back, and he died. And why he did it, nobody knows. He didn't have to die in that way. Right here is Megiddo. Down here is the valley of where Josiah died. Kind of a sad story. A great man like that could die. When you get there, get ready. He may have had a good reason, but nobody knows why he died like that. Okay, class.